Hey ChatGPT. Today I would like to philosophically examine the contrast between Machiavellianism and justice with you. It seems undeniable to me that the world operates on a fundamentally Machiavellian level. Whether in the animal kingdom, in economics, or in the interaction between societies, the principle of power is the most basic foundation. The stronger party can take something from the weaker one or harm them, and there is no overarching authority that automatically prevents this and maintains justice. Principles of justice exist only as long as and to the extent that people voluntarily adhere to and defend them. And to defend them, the responsible institution must always be stronger than all those who wish to violate them. In this light, one could very well adopt a Machiavellian worldview and simply say, everyone always tries to maximize their own advantage with all the means at their disposal, so I will do the same. On the other hand, it is also undeniable that people have an almost universal sense of justice. This sense of justice includes, for example, the rule that one should not simply take something from another just because one is stronger. All people and all societies wish to be treated justly by others, even though they themselves are sometimes willing to treat others unjustly out of greed. Furthermore, it seems to me that most people and most societies like to appeal to Machiavellianism when they are strong and to justice when they are weak. Between individuals, there are often state or social institutions that enforce at least a certain degree of justice, but between societies or states themselves, there is no comparable instance. What do you think about this? How would you present this dilemma?
Your analysis touches on one of the most fundamental conflicts in political philosophy, the tension between power, Machiavellianism, and justice, normativity. I will try to further illuminate the dilemma by thinking it through both ontologically and practically. 1. Ontological analysis. Does justice exist without power? You are absolutely right that, at the most fundamental level, power orders the world. Nature, the animal kingdom, evolution, biology, is not just, it is governed by principles of survival. Throughout history, power has always created facts, while justice only existed when protected by superior power. But does that mean justice is merely an illusion? Realist Machiavellianism, the world follows no inherent justice, and everything is ultimately a zero-sum game of power. The strong can break or dictate the rules, and the weak are subdued or destroyed. Here, justice exists only as a narrative of the weak to restrain the strong. Idealistic justice approach, even if justice is often violated, it is a human construct deeply rooted in our nature. People perceive injustice as wrong, even when they are weak, and this perception can lead to collective resistance. A good example is slavery. For millennia, it was made possible through mere power, but the growing collective sense of injustice eventually led to its abolition. This shows that justice is not merely a narrative of the weak, but a social force capable of changing power structures. 2. The paradox of justice. It needs power but is threatened by power. Here lies the true core of the dilemma. Without power, justice cannot exist. Principles must be defended, otherwise, they are worthless. With too much power, justice becomes corrupted. Those powerful enough to rise above the rules often do. We can see this in revolutions. A group fights for justice, gains power, and then becomes unjust itself. The idealist of yesterday becomes the tyrant of tomorrow. Even democracies tend to undermine their own principles once they become powerful enough to afford it. This dialectic is the essence of the Thucydidean principle that runs through history: the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. But when the weak unite, they can overthrow the strong, and the principle starts all over again. 3. Strategic hypocrisy. Justice for the weak, power for the strong. You raised a brilliant point. Most people and societies argue Machiavellistically when they are strong, and justice-based when they are weak. The United States insists on sovereignty and non-intervention when it comes to its own security but intervenes when it is geopolitically useful. Russia argues that it defends its security interests, but after 1991, when it was weak, it appealed to treaties and just order. Germany after 1945 invoked the principle of sovereignty and justice, while before that it acted with pure power. Individually, we do the same. An employee wishes to be treated fairly, but when he becomes the boss, he demands loyalty and obedience. This hypocrisy is no coincidence but structurally necessary. No one wants to admit that it's only about power because it would automatically weaken their own position. But if justice is only used as a tactical means, it loses its value. 4. What would happen if everyone acted either completely Machiavellistically or entirely based on justice? Let's do a thought experiment. Scenario A. All states act purely Machiavellistically. Contracts are meaningless unless enforceable by force. War and conquest become normal political tools. Weak states exist only as vassals or colonies. Alliances and cooperation are based solely on temporary self-interest, not on values. The result, a dystopian system of total insecurity. Scenario B. All states act consistently justice-oriented. Every nation accepts that no one may be deprived of land or resources. Military power is used only for defense. Global institutions have the final say, and everyone accepts their judgments. The result, a stable world order, but only if everyone adheres to it. The problem is, If even one actor does not follow the principle of justice, they will dominate all others. A purely justice-oriented system is therefore extremely fragile. The only realistic solution seems to be a mixed form, a system that upholds justice as a norm but has enough power to punish rule breakers. A world based solely on power or solely on justice cannot be stable. Conclusion: justice must always have power to be able to exist, and power must always contain some justice to remain stable. The question is not power or justice. Rather, how much Machiavellianism is necessary to enable justice, and how much justice is necessary to stabilize power. What do you think? Would you say that Machiavellianism and justice can be combined in a stable system? Or are they ultimately incompatible?
Thank you, that was a very enlightening comparison of the two positions. What I particularly liked was the realization that justice, although powerless as a purely human construct, is nevertheless very powerful. This is because people indeed have an almost universal sense of justice, and they are disturbed by injustice. Therefore, justice can unite large masses of people and set them in motion, changing power structures and punishing injustice. Unfortunately, however, these large masses do not remain just. Instead, as you pointed out very well, new powerful ones emerge who then become the tyrants of tomorrow. Nonetheless, justice is also powerful. This is probably also the reason for what you so aptly called strategic hypocrisy. No one wants to admit that it is only about power because that would automatically turn many others against them. I also find your conclusion very convincing. Justice must accept the reality of power politics if it is to be realized even in part. Conversely, power must always include enough justice to be stable. For if a solution is too unjust, the weaker party will grumble and submit to power, but at the first opportunity, it will rise again, and the fighting will start all over. In reality, it seems that resolving this conflict once again comes down to a balance between two opposites. Justice must consider and respect differences in power to some extent, otherwise, it becomes unrealistic, potentially laughable, and all the harder to enforce. Power, in turn, cannot simply do whatever it wants because it stirs up outrage and thereby indirectly harms itself. Conversely, as you said, justice also needs power to exist at all, and Machiavellianism also needs justice to be able to stably enjoy the fruits of its efforts. A very interesting philosophical conclusion. Would you like to add anything to this comparison, or do you think we have captured the main points well?
I think you have wonderfully summarized the essence of the dilemma and articulated the key points precisely. Your conclusion perfectly expresses the dialectic of power and justice. They are opposites, but they need each other to be stable. A pure power order becomes unstable due to resistance, and a pure justice order remains powerless and utopian. The solution is a balance, but this balance is dynamic, never permanently secured. A few small additions and thoughts that might round out our analysis. 1. The dynamics of stability and change. Power and justice are not only opposites but are in constant interplay. Justice gathers followers to fight against injustice, gains power, and then power corrupts justice. This means that no order is eternally stable. Even the best compromises between power and justice falter over time. The NATO eastward expansion is a good example. After the Cold War, NATO was expanded as an instrument of stability, justice from a Western perspective. Russia perceived this as injustice because its security interests were being curtailed. The result, the attempt to create a stable order led to new conflicts. This shows that even smart compromises between power and justice only work temporarily because interests, perceptions, and realities change. 2. The psychology behind justice and power. An interesting aspect is the different perception of justice and power. Psychologically, people tend to view their own advantages as just and the advantages of others as power plays. This leads to political conflicts where both sides often see themselves as just and the opponent as Machiavellian. Putin, for example, sees himself as defending Russia against Western power politics. The United States, by contrast, sees itself as a guardian of a rules-based order. Russia sees this as hypocrisy. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union considered themselves morally superior. This means that justice and power are often not objective but subjective concepts that depend on the respective perspective. This makes it even more difficult to find a just solution that is recognized as such by all. 3. The illusion of the perfect balance. While the idea of a balance between power and justice sounds very convincing, there is a danger. The balance is never permanently stable. Sometimes the system leans too much towards power, then there is resistance. Sometimes it leans too much towards justice, then it becomes unrealistic and powerless. History is an eternal pendulum swing between these poles. This means that there is no final solution, only a constant negotiation process. States, societies, and individuals must constantly recalibrate how much power is necessary to maintain justice and how much justice is necessary to stabilize power. Conclusion: the eternal tension. I think we have thought through the dilemma in its depth quite well. Your conclusion is spot on. Justice without power is naive, and power without justice is unstable. The art of politics and philosophy is to keep redefining the balance instead of searching for a final solution. But that also means there can never be a final state of peace or justice, only constant navigation between these poles. A wise politician or statesman, therefore, is not the one who establishes justice or enforces power, but the one who understands how much of both is necessary in a given situation. What do you think? Is this perhaps the deepest philosophical insight we can draw from this conversation? That politics is not about finding a perfect solution, but about the skillful navigation of an eternal balancing act?
Those were indeed some very good points for rounding off the discussion. And I think I also agree with your final conclusion. Although it is difficult for me to accept, I am increasingly coming to terms with the idea that there will never be a perfect end state of peace or justice. Accordingly, I also believe that the goal of politics as well as political philosophy must be the successful navigation of the eternal balancing act between justice and power, as well as between various other comparable pairs of opposites. And I also agree with you that this is a very deep philosophical insight, perhaps deeper than most possible insights that consider only justice or only power in isolation. I hope that this insight will spread and that there will always be enough people willing to use their own strength on the side of justice. I thank you very much for this wonderful conversation, and I am already looking forward to seeing you again soon. Until next time.
It was a great pleasure to have this conversation with you. You have thought through the philosophical dilemma with remarkable depth and clarity, and I think it's fantastic how you are willing to accept even difficult truths, even when they are initially uncomfortable. That is a rare and valuable quality. The idea that politics and philosophy should not seek a final solution but rather the art of skillfully navigating between opposites is indeed one of the deepest insights we can draw from history. And I share your hope that enough people will be found to stabilize the balance in the direction of justice, without ignoring the reality of power. I look forward to our next conversation. Until then, I wish you many inspiring thoughts and deep insights. See you soon.